Good morning, Revolution, everybody, and welcome to our show this morning. I think we got a new audience this morning, Rosanna and Michael and Scott. We got Twitter. Twitter is in the house, so hello to all of you on Twitter. We're happy to have you. Want to see your comments, criticisms, praise. Praise works too. Ain't nothing wrong with it. A lot happened during the week. And we're going to talk about all of it. Judge Jackson's confirmation. We're going to talk about the Biden budget. And by the way, there were some unemployment numbers in this morning, so we might want to deal with that. It's a basic working class issue, including the Great Resignation, which is still going on. Labor updates for union organizing at Starbucks and Amazon. And then finally, let's talk about let's talk about it first. First of all, last week we mentioned that there was an effort by a union in Los Angeles, some chateau, something or other. Jay-Z and them were having an after party there, and they asked them, don't cross the picket line. And do you know what happened, Rosanna?
Actually, I don't.
They crossed the picket line. They crossed the picket. I'm so disappointed. I'm so disappointed. I mean, Scott, when I was a young child, my father was going to take us to get some gifts. I don't know, it wasn't Christmas. And we drove up to the store, and there was a picket line in front of it. And Dad said, sorry, guys, we can't. We got to wait for a while to get what you want. We can't cross the picket line. We were like, why, Daddy? Why? It's right what we want is right there. Come on. He said, no, I just can't do it. I said, why? He said, because number one, the workers are on strike. I'm a worker. And if I was on strike, I wouldn't want nobody crossing the picket line on me. And he said, and the second thing he said was that if I crossed that picket line, I wouldn't be able to show my face anywhere in this town for the rest of my life. I would be labeled a scab. Jay-Z, you're a scab.
That's right.
Yes, the Hollywood elite.
Man, you're on the wrong side of the class struggle. Speaking of the Oscars, is this an appropriate topic for Marxism, Leninism, the Oscars, and what happened with Chris Rock and what's his name?
Pierce.
What's his name?
Will Smith.
Huh?
Will Smith.
Will Smith. You know, I had a dream about Will Smith. It must have been 15 years ago. And because, he has this like nice guy persona. You ever see the Fresh Prince, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? He has this really nice guy persona. He's a good actor, by the way. He won an Academy Award, so that says something. And so I had this dream about him. We were in Philadelphia in the park and probably smoking a joint or something. And then lo and behold, that incident happened so what should happen to him? Anita, I know you don't want to talk about this.
No, I want to talk about Jay-Z, but I think it's all of a piece. I think the Hollywood elite needs to be schooled like your father schooled you back in the day. You don't cross a picket line, and they should know why, and they should understand that. And a lot of these people are union members too. They're members of SAG or whatever, the musicians union. So it's really despicable that they don't know enough to not cross a picket line. I don't care how, and maybe it's that they're owning up to their billionaire or millionaire status. They see themselves as the part of the 1%. They don't need to worry about that anymore. But that is just despicable behavior, and they should all be called out on it.
Well, it also means we got to build trade union consciousness, in this country, build class consciousness, because a lot of these basketball and football players, they make a lot of money, and of course they have a very short career, 5-10 years, and your bones are broken and your brain is damaged, and you got to pay somebody to feed you after that. But and I doubt that they would cross the picket line. So we need to, build class consciousness even amongst those who are making a lot of money. But Rosanna, is the Oscars and Chris and Jay and Will Smith, is that an appropriate topic for Marxism, Leninism, in your opinion, early in the morning?
Well, I think there's a couple of levels on this issue, actually. There's a husband standing up for his partner, his wife. Of course, not, violently is not the answer. There's this idea that we idolize movie stars as if they are perfect, and they're not perfect. They have baggage, they have backgrounds, they have, lived experiences that they, they're still trying to overcome some of the weaknesses. So I think in that respect, we could have a little Marxist analysis of those things.
Good point. Good point. And then also, Scott, jokes that are made about a person's physical feature, disability, sexual orientation, they're not fit for, I don't like that kind of humor. Scott, can you hear me?
We can't hear you.
Is your mic on, Scott? He might be in the green room. It says he's in the green room. We're going to come back to Scott in a moment. Anita, what do you think?
What about Scott's not being able to hear us, or
No.
sorry.
I mean, is it about jokes about a person's,
Is it an appropriate topic?
this humor that makes fun of?
No, it isn't. I mean, it sounded like a cruel joke, and I think people can be funny without resorting to that level of humor. Sorry, when you said Scott and you had a question for him, I thought, well, I'll just think about the next thing. So.
Well, I'm in solidarity with my sister because, but when I lost my hair, it was freeing. I'm so thankful to Michael Jordan and them when they shaved it, because it gave me permission to shave my hair. So I'll tell you a little story. My partner at the time, Alicia, she shaved my head, and my sister and my niece were present, and my niece was in the other room, and she came out of the bedroom and walked into the living room and took one look at me, screamed, and ran out the room. She was about 5 or 6 years old. That gave me a whole lot of confidence about my physical appearance. Anyway, I survived it. Let's move on. Another thing that happened that's still going on this week is the confirmation of Judge Jackson. And they're really trying to get some Republicans to support the nomination. And Susan Collins said that she's going to vote. She's going to vote, Rosanna, which is good, I think, for Judge Jackson. But the rest of them knuckleheads are not part of the picture,
I think I'm here now, Joe. Sorry for the technical issue.
I'm glad you're here. We're talking about Judge Jackson's confirmation now, and that Susan Collins is going to. We talked about this last week, and we ragged on the senator from South Carolina. What's his name? Lindsey Graham. And Ted Cruz, they were so ugly. You want to talk about ugly. Talk about Lindsey Graham. That's about the ugliest politician I have ever come across. And I think they're going to vote in a couple of days, next week, isn't it? And she'll be the first African-American woman to sit on the Supreme Court. And I want to say this, she handled herself magnificently. I mean, she didn't lose her cool. She, stood in the storm, weathered it with dignity and poise. And I'm glad it wasn't me because I would have wanted to get up and talk about Will Smith smacking Chris Rock. I want to smack Lindsey Graham. I mean, it's a joke. I'm not advocating violence. But Scott, what do you think? I mean,
Yeah, well, I was going to say on the slap, you know, I wish somebody would have done that to Donald Trump when he made that cracked that joke about the reporter with the disability.
yeah,
You know, that would have been something to see. But on the confirmation here, yeah, it just, you know, it was another reminder of how much more is demanded of oppressed people in terms of their public behavior. You know, the entitlement of someone like Lindsey Graham thinking they can, you know, run all over somebody, deliberately, you know, try to provoke them, and just the incredible self-mastery and poise, as you mentioned, you know, having to sit there and be polite to people who are, you know, trying to walk all over you. It's, you know, it's superhuman. I was really impressed. And, you know, the confirmation of the first African-American woman to the Supreme Court is a big deal, but it shouldn't be. It's long past time. Didn't Ruth Bader Ginsburg say somebody asked her, you know, when will there be enough women on the Supreme Court? And she said, when there are 9. There were 9 men for a long time and nobody mentioned anything.
there
So
you go. There you go.
I think she'll be confirmed. I hope she'll be confirmed. And yeah.
Anita, Rosanna, you want to add anything?
I want to add something, Joe. I think it's just despicable how there's 40 plus Republicans that don't seem to be they're not intending to vote for Judge Jackson. And I can understand, I mean, Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham and all those guys, they gave us their reasons. But on all accounts, she's the most qualified person to ever be even nominated to the court. She has such vast experience and varied experience that none of the other justices have. So I just think it's despicable. We, you know, I mean, Susan Collins, thank you. You know, she owes us that vote after she voted for Brett Kavanaugh because she thought he wouldn't overturn Roe v. Wade. But and he was such a despicable person in his confirmation hearings. He really demonstrated a bad, you know, kind of judicial temperament. He had none. So I just wonder why, like, people like my Senator Rob Portman and other Republicans who really are they endorsing what Ted Cruz said and what Lindsey Graham said, or are they going to vote for her? We'll see next week.
We know why. Ain't no mystery. One is racism. Second is male supremacy, or maybe it's male supremacy first and racism second. And thirdly, it's class privilege. Or maybe they're all lined up together on the same line, interpenetrating, you know, all together, all at the same moment, you know, and that's a many-headed hydra. That's a many. Okay. We're going to move speaking of things that took a long time. They passed an anti-lynching law last week. Took them 100 years, Rosanna. 100 years. I mean, boy.
You know, it's such an embarrassment for our country to be promoting justice all throughout the world, quote unquote, you know, where they're going to save folks. And here at home, it's disastrous, you know, to put an anti-lynching law, to pass it 100 years later or so, it's shameful. You know, it's hypocritical to be on the one side to say one thing and on the other, you know, it's like, what does that proverb say or something about he who, I don't remember. Anyway, it's not good.
Somebody should have told Joe Biden that when he was, you know, agitating everybody in Warsaw about the virtues of bourgeois democracy. took y'all 100 years to pass. I believe it was in 1919. The NAACP had a silent march. They all were all dressed in white down Fifth Avenue, protest lynching. Now here we are 102 years later, 103 years later, it's 2022, right? And they finally, well, I hope it don't take that long to pass the PRO Act.
Yeah, on the PRO Act, what I wonder is, I believe Joe Manchin is a co-sponsor of that act. Like, so where is he? Like, he's apparently, the kingmaker or whatever. He decides what can be done. He's the co-sponsor of the PRO. Why hasn't there been some movement on it? Let's get it done. That and voting rights are the two most consequential.
Let's get it done. Speaking of the president's budget and its agenda, his agenda, the Democrats' agenda, but it's not just Joe Biden's agenda. Anybody who thinks that this is Joe Biden, they're wrong, because the platform that the Democrats adopted was a platform won in struggle. If it's anybody's platform, it's Bernie Sanders. I mean, because a lot of the progressive planks came about as a result of the growth of the Sanders campaign and the big rallies and the struggles that lay beneath them. But if you look at the Biden budget that they just presented before Congress, Anita, most of the progressive are missing. Why did they do that?
A lot of it is missing. There are some redeeming features, and that is the billionaires tax, which is a tax on the 0.01% of the population. So, but there's still, like, I don't know, 2.5 trillion will be collected in those higher taxes. But there's still a huge defense spending provision in there as well.
Is it a concession, Rosanna, to the right, or is it a skillful adaptation to political reality? I mean, the Senate is tied 50-50. Manchin and Semina are playing footsie with the Republicans. So what sense does it make to, some are arguing, and not necessarily me, I'm just playing the devil's advocate, but what sense does it make to put all that stuff if it won't get passed?
Well, I think we have to try different methods to be able to see how much we can gain. A lot of people were talking about Medicare, the Obamacare as senseless, but we have it, and it's been very beneficial, even though it has its limitations. So it's almost like how do we get our foot in the door more closely, or
Good point. Scott, somebody made the point yesterday that Roosevelt had the same situation. I'm not quite sure it was the same, but because Roosevelt he had 2 or 3 terms, but in one of his presidencies, is that the right word? He had to split his program up, Scott, into several different parts. And he made the Republicans vote on each one and show their cowardice, show their true colors on each one. And at the end of the day, they got all of them passed. I don't know, Scott, if that's a good tactic for today or not, but what do you think? Is it a concession to the right, or is it an admission of political reality not to include all that stuff and to try to get done what you can get done before the midterms?
It's a hard call, right? Because there's a kind of technique or a defense system of of the ruling class that consists of this fetishization of the notion of a given political oh, we can't do this, we can't do this. The reality is this. We have to be pragmatic, and that's important. We have to understand, what the situation on the ground really is. On the other hand, we don't admit that things are frozen. We think dialectically. We think in terms of things changing. So does it make sense for Biden to kind of go slow, break it up, whatever? What I would want to see is some evidence that he's actually committed to having these things passed, because my sense is that he wants to be seen pushing for all of these things, but he's very content, and a large chunk of the Democratic Party is very content to look like they've adopted these things, but not actually make any progress on them. Look, we fought for expanded health. We fought for more social welfare programs, but with the Manchin and cinema and where our hands are tied, right? Well, you're part of the ruling class. Untie your damn hands. Sorry, that's how I'm approaching this.
Now, speaking of Mr. Biden, Scott, did you write that speech that he made in Warsaw? I know y'all are close.
Yeah. We workshopped it, in our Friday meeting for beers. As you know, I think the United States is a guiding light of democracy, and I believe that we should be intervening. I'm sorry, I can't even say this. It's April Fool's Day, everybody. It was a repulsive speech. It was a complete display of arrogance, of blindness to history. And it really showed that, the reason that we have the fascist threat that we have now is because of 70, 80 years of hardcore anti-communism allowed the worst forces of the right to sneak into the mainstream and build there. So Biden's attempt to resurrect some kind of Cold War bullshit around this idea of authoritarian, whatever, that is, it's going to end poorly. It's already ending poorly. It's going to end even worse.
I have a question. Do you think at the end of his speech, Biden called for regime change? He said, by golly, or by God, or one of those phrases, that man has got to go. Anita, was that an accident, or was it accidentally on purpose?
It was accidentally on purpose, apparently. I think it was not part of the written, the press ahead of time got the written speech, but that line at the end was an ad lib on Biden's part. And I guess he's trying to, appeal to the hawks in his base and in his party, unfortunately, who are really clamoring for more war. So it was despicable, and really, it's not behaving well these days. So it's a problem.
Was it an ad lib, or was it, deliberate?
Plausible deniability. Oh, sorry, Rosanna.
Yeah, I think it's deliberate myself. I think he was testing the waters just to see what kind of reaction. I don't think these politicians do anything ad lib or oops kind of thing. It's deliberate to test the waters and see. They're experts. They're experts at these kinds of invasions and taking over other countries and all of that kind of stuff. So I don't see it as anything but deliberate.
Scott, ad lib or deliberate?
Deliberate. I'm with Rosanna. Absolutely testing the waters in the way that Trump did with so many of his pronouncements on Twitter, or attempts at executive actions that were later, pushed back on. I think it was like, am I going to get pushed back on this? And I read an article recently suggesting that there's a kind of split even within the administration, within the ruling class over over the interpretation of what Putin is doing in Ukraine, with some folks at the Pentagon saying that it's saying that we have to be much more cautious about, it's not a kind of total war scenario. We have to stop trying to amp everything up. We have to, try to de-escalate. And then the press and a lot of politicians who are out on the stump trying to get elected or reelected, trying to act tough, just like Biden is.
But to what end? To what end, if it's deliberate, what are they trying to? Do you think that they actually want to go in and overthrow Mr. Putin?
Well, it's for profits. It's all for profits. The war machines they're reaping all of this money that, it's not the U.S. just handing things over. It's the U.S. is buying all of this from the military industrial complex. It's all about profits. And it's our tax dollars. Once again, it's our tax dollars, and we have to put a stop to that.
Maybe it needed, following on Rosanna's point, they're trying to put pressure inside the Kremlin to have a coup so that some of those businessmen, I almost slipped and called them oligarchs, and you know how I feel about that, that there'll be internal dissent. There's been a lot of psychological warfare this week, by the way, in the press. And, well, the commanders, the Soviet commanders aren't there. I heard that this morning. Then yesterday they said, well,
Joe, not Soviet. Not Soviet.
Huh?
The other one. Not Soviet commanders, Russian commanders.
The what?
You said Soviet commanders.
Oh, well, Soviet commanders are definitely not there. They left about 40 years ago. And those who stayed, they turned coat. They turned coat. But anyway, they said that they're not telling Putin the truth. He doesn't know what's going on the ground, that they're getting their butt whooped on, and all of this kind of psychological, what they call it, psychops. But it's a very dangerous game, Scott. It's a very dangerous game because, not only is it the issue of the amount of nuclear weapons that both sides possess, it's the notion that the Americans, United States citizens, have a right to say what goes on and how people choose their leader in another country, no matter how screwed up they are.
And I think the other aspect of this is, along with the profits that Rosanna mentioned, is there's an ideological aspect to it too. I think there's a sense that Biden has obviously not been able to deliver on the progressive vision that was laid out in the campaign and early in the term. And there's an attempt to sort of create a new narrative, right? Or find a different kind of national unity around, this fight against authoritarianism, right? It reminds me actually of an op-ed or an opinion piece that Thomas Friedman published in the New York Times a couple years ago. And he started off really well. He said, this whole problem of incivility, tribalism, whatever you want to call it, is really coming from the right wing. That's the real problem. And I was like, oh, wow, that's great. But then he said, you know what we need? We need something like Cold War era anti-communism that everybody can agree with, that will bring the nation together, right? And I think that's kind of where Biden is. That this idea that we can create this ideological unity through this cobbled together half-assed notion of authoritarianism that he has, that you've written about, Joe. And it's really dangerous.
At best, they ain't say nothing about the Saudi Arabian dictatorship or the dictatorship in Egypt or in Hungary or in any other place around the world. It's Russia, Russia, China, Russia,
But I
Cuba,
suspect
Russia.
Putin is
I mean,
playing a
that's kind of,
similar game.
huh?
I think Putin's playing a similar game, though. I think part of this whole invasion of Ukraine is a kind of amplifier, megaphone, platform, whatever, for his own kind of ideological narrative, hodgepodge of, vague nostalgia for the Soviet Union, coupled with, the politics and iconography of the Romanovs, in the sort of,
Of the Tsarist Empire.
yeah. I mean, that's the flag he flies on the Kremlin when he's there.
That's an issue which we need to do more research on. In any event, I think that does it for this week. We want to thank everybody for coming and talking and listening. And we'll be back next week, same time, same station. Once again, welcome Twitter folks. And Rosanna, Scott, and Anita, stay strong, stay safe, stay in the fight. See y'all next week.
Bye, everybody.
Later.
Bye, everyone.